The courtroom fell silent, the air thick with an unspoken tension. Day 17 of the Sean Diddy Combs trial had arrived, and with it, a name no one expected. Most anticipated another music executive, perhaps a lesser-known figure from Diddy's shadowy past. But as the doors opened, a murmur rippled through the gallery. Standing in the doorway, dressed in a dark suit, his face solemn, was George Clooney. Even the stenographer's fingers hesitated. George Clooney. Hollywood royalty, humanitarian icon, global spokesperson for justice. He was here to testify against Sean Diddy Combs. Clooney stepped to the stand slowly, deliberately avoiding Diddy's gaze. His hands were steady, but his jaw was tight. "I never imagined I'd be here," he began, his voice low but firm. "But there are things I've seen, things I can't carry anymore." He explained how he'd been drawn into Diddy's orbit over a decade ago. It started with lavish parties, then private retreats, eventually culminating in cryptic after-hours invitations. At first, it felt like being inducted into some secret fraternity, he recalled. It was flattering, mysterious. You get invited to places most people don't even know exist, and when Diddy invites you, you show up. That's how it works in our world. The tone shifted dramatically around 2013. Clooney received a plain envelope with no return address. Inside, a single note card. No words, just GPS coordinates and a time, 2 a.m. He initially dismissed it as a prank until a text arrived from an unknown number. "Follow the coordinates, wear black, no phone." Curiosity, he admitted, outweighed caution. He followed the instructions. "I was driven in a black SUV through side streets and industrial zones. Eventually, we stopped in the parking structure of a major theme park one I can't name, but millions of families visit every year." He paused, looking at the jury. "That was the first time I entered the cave, and I've never looked at Hollywood the same way since." The courtroom held its breath. The image of George Clooney, alone in a theme park at 2 a.m., about to step into something darker than any movie script, was surreal. And it was only the beginning. The secrets hidden beneath that park were far more disturbing than any blockbuster. George Clooney's voice dropped lower as he leaned toward the microphone, his eyes fixed straight ahead. "What I saw underneath that theme park," he said slowly, "was not a party. It wasn't a gathering. It was something else entirely. Something designed." The courtroom was silent, transfixed. He described being escorted through an unmarked service door near a staff-only loading bay, down a winding concrete corridor lit by flickering fluorescent lights. They passed several security checkpoints, each guarded by men who didn't speak. "They weren't bodyguards," Clooney noted. "They were something else, cold, efficient, and they knew who I was without ever asking." Eventually, they reached what looked like a reinforced metal hatch. It hissed open. Beyond it lay a massive underground chamber carved deep into the earth. Clooney described soft ambient lighting, music that pulsed like a heartbeat, and dozens of individuals, celebrities, politicians, athletes, mingling in luxury robes, sipping from gold-plated cups. But one thing stood out immediately. There were people there with no arms, no legs, Clooney said quietly. Some were wheeled in, some sat on pillows. They were referred to as nuggets. That was the term everyone used casually, like it was nothing. He paused, his eyes narrowing. I couldn't believe it. These weren't just spectators. They were part of it. The centerpiece. He admitted he didn't understand at first. I asked someone what the hell was going on. They laughed and said, "Don't worry, they volunteered. It's part of the fun." But it didn't feel fun, it felt wrong. Clooney explained that before anyone was allowed deeper into the chamber, they had to sign an NDA, a thick one, enforced by a security firm he later recognized as a private intelligence group. If you didn't sign, you didn't go in. That's how they got everyone. He refused, but instead of being kicked out, he was escorted to a side lounge. I watched from a glass wall. What I saw still wakes me up at night. People I once respected behaving like animals. And those nuggets, they weren't just accessories. They were being passed around, paraded like props. The judge asked if Clooney had ever participated. His answer was firm. No, not once. I stayed in that lounge. I drank my whiskey. I left as soon as I could. He added, I thought it was an isolated incident, but it wasn't. There were more invitations, more caves, always tied to Diddy. Clooney's hands were trembling now. I didn't speak because I thought silence was survival. But silence is how this stayed alive. Yet his silence came at a steep price, revealing the sinister control Diddy wielded over Hollywood careers. George Clooney sat upright, his face hardening as he recounted what happened after he declined to return to the cave. "I thought I was out," he said, "but in Hollywood, nothing ends clean. You walk away from Diddy, and you don't just walk away from a person. You walk away from protection, connections, and sometimes your entire career." He told the court that after his refusal to engage further, he started noticing things. Phone calls went unanswered, projects that had once been greenlit were suddenly stalled, and a director he'd worked with for years backed out of a major deal. "Nobody said it was Diddy, but the silence was loud," Clooney stated. "It was like there was a cloud following me. I was still George Clooney, but there was this invisible hand pulling strings I couldn't see. What disturbed him more was what he witnessed happening to others. He described an actor, a household name, who had confided in him about experiencing something similar. The actor had attended one of Diddy's cave events, stayed too long, saw too much, and spoke to the wrong person about it. A week later, the actor's name was plastered across tabloids with false accusations. Within months, their career imploded. Clooney said it was too coordinated to be coincidence. They knew how to destroy someone, not with violence, with silence, suggestion, and strategic scandal. Clooney then revealed he had kept a journal during that period, noting every suspicious cancellation, every unexplained call from unnamed PR firms urging him to distance himself from certain people. He turned those pages over to the court. But the most haunting part of this segment came when Clooney admitted the real reason he stayed close to Diddy's circle, even after what he'd seen. "I was scared," he said. "Not of violence, of exile. In our business, fame is oxygen. They control the air supply." He paused, then continued. "There were nights I'd be at a fundraiser, a gala, a premiere, and Diddy would show up out of nowhere. He'd hug me, smile for cameras, whisper in my ear, 'Still part of the family, right?' And I'd nod, because saying no out loud in front of that many people, I couldn't do it. The courtroom was still. I never did what they did, but I stayed close, and that's haunted me every day." But the circle of complicity extended far beyond Diddy's immediate sphere, reaching the highest echelons of power and celebrity. George Clooney's jaw tightened as the prosecutor asked him to elaborate on who else was present at these secret gatherings. He hesitated, glancing across the courtroom. "I won't name names on this record," he said. "But if this court demands it privately, I will provide the list." The judge nodded. Clooney continued. "These weren't just obscure socialites or one-time reality stars. I saw billionaires, Oscar winners, tech moguls, a couple of elected officials, people whose entire brands were built on decency and public trust. And they were all there in robes, in masks, signing NDAs like it was routine, laughing, joking, participating." The courtroom murmured. Clooney leaned forward. What made these parties work, and what made them so dangerous, was the protection everyone gave each other. You weren't just there to indulge. You were there to be seen indulging by others. So no one ever talked because to talk meant mutual destruction. He described being approached weeks after the cave incident by a high-level producer who casually referenced nuggets during a lunch meeting, smiling as if it were a shared inside joke. "That's when I realized it wasn't a secret," Clooney said. "It was an institution." He revealed that many of the celebrities involved were drawn in not through threats, but through promises. The promise of eternal relevance, unbreakable networks, and access to what he called the true social pyramid of fame. The court gasped when Clooney described a guest book, an actual bound ledger, he claimed to have seen on a podium near the entrance to the underground cave. Everyone who entered had to sign. He didn't, but he remembered a few of the names on the page above his. Ones, he said, would shock the average American household. "I've kept this to myself for too long," he said, visibly shaking now. "Not because I was guilty, but because I didn't want to be erased. That's what happens when you speak out. You vanish. You become a headline for a week, and then your career is gone." He looked directly at the jury. "But I'm 63 years old. I've won everything I need to win. What I haven't done is tell the truth about what I saw and who was there and why it matters." Then he glanced for the first time at Diddy. And he was always in the middle, smiling, watching like a king in his cave. The truth, however, would soon find its way to him, delivered in a chilling package that forced his hand. George Clooney's testimony took a turn as he reached into a small leather folder his legal team had brought in earlier. With trembling hands, he pulled out a sealed manila envelope and placed it gently on the witness stand. "I debated for years whether to open this," he said, "and when I finally did, it changed everything." He explained that the envelope had been slipped under his door in 2017. No name, no note, just a black wax seal stamped with the letter P. At the time, he was in Lake Como, far removed from Hollywood, trying to live a quieter life.
So, allegations
It was my
this
sanctuary,
morning in the Diddy trial of dirty
but
pool
the past
on
always
the...
finds a way back. Inside the envelope were 6 glossy photographs. Clooney testified he brought them to the courtroom, though only one had been approved for display. He described the photo: a dimly lit shot from inside the underground cave, grainy but unmistakable. A cluster of recognizable celebrities gathered around what looked like a small sunken stage. In the center of that stage was a single figure on a red pillow. A nugget. No arms, no legs. Blindfolded. "The image shook me," Clooney said, his voice cracking. "Not just because of what it showed, but because I recognized the man sitting closest to the nugget. It was someone I'd worked with, someone America idolized." He refused to name the man aloud, but passed the photo to the judge under seal. Clooney continued, "This wasn't a prank. This wasn't some photoshopped smear. It was real, and whoever sent it to me wanted me to know that it was time to choose a side: silence or exposure." He said that moment was his breaking point. He contacted an attorney, prepared a sworn affidavit, and stored everything in a private vault. "I started thinking about my family," he said, "about my wife, my children, what kind of man I was if I just let this continue." Clooney testified that in the years since, he had been approached twice, once at a charity gala and once outside a film premiere, by people who handed him notes that read only, "Still watching." He kept them both. The prosecutor asked if he feared for his safety. Clooney nodded. "Absolutely, but I'm more afraid of what happens if nobody talks." He looked around the courtroom again and said, "This case isn't just about one man's crimes. It's about a system built on silence. And today I'm choosing to break mine." But the true horror wasn't just the depravity, but the elaborate system designed to conceal it, built directly under the noses of millions. George Clooney leaned forward, his voice growing quieter, almost conspiratorial. "I want the court to understand this wasn't just a cave. It was an operation. Designed, engineered, hidden in plain sight." He explained that the entrance to the underground compound wasn't beneath some remote wilderness or obscure warehouse. It was, in his words, strategically built under a family-friendly theme park, one of the busiest in the world. Though he didn't name it, he emphasized that millions walk right past the entrance every year. "It's so close to normalcy, it's practically mocking it," Clooney stated. He described what he remembered from his one trip inside: a freight elevator hidden behind a maintenance tunnel, no lights, no signs. Once inside, it dropped several levels underground, bypassing any standard security systems. He claimed the descent took nearly a full minute, during which time no one spoke. It felt like being dropped into another world, and that's exactly what it was. Clooney provided a rough layout he'd sketched with his attorney: a long central corridor lined with small, soundproof rooms, each marked with a single symbol. At the end of the corridor sat what he called the Circle, a massive dome-shaped chamber with mirrored walls and velvet flooring where the so-called nugget parties were held. Everything about it was ritualized, he said. There were rules. There were rotations. The participants never questioned it, because if you were there, you were already compromised. He explained that inside the circle there was always one rule: no names. Everyone wore masks, elaborately designed, often resembling animals or distorted human faces. Some participants arrived already in robes, others changed on site. Clooney noted that a security team of former military personnel kept watch on every room, but none of them intervened. They were part of it, he added, as they kept the peace, not the law. One of the most chilling revelations was the presence of a recording booth, a glass room elevated above the circle with tinted windows and blinking red lights. Someone was always up there, Clooney said. We didn't know who, but we knew we were being watched, documented. The court fell silent as he ended the segment with a single sentence. You think Hollywood makes movies about secret societies for fun? That's called projection. Yet, even within this tightly controlled world, there was a night that shattered its own dark rules, forcing Clooney to witness a test of loyalty that would forever alter his understanding of Hollywood. George Clooney paused, breathing slowly as he stared at his hands. There's something I've never told anyone, he began. Not my wife, not my lawyer, not even my closest friends. He recounted one night around 2015 when the circle broke its own rules. It was a night unlike any other. An unusual invitation had been sent out. No printed NDA, just a black card with the words, "Only the initiated," embossed in silver. Clooney didn't plan to go, but a producer he trusted insisted he show up, claiming everything was changing. So Clooney went, and what he saw, he said, felt different from all his past visits. The energy was tense. The usual mirth was gone. Diddy arrived late, wearing all white and flanked by two unnamed men with shaved heads and dark glasses. Clooney said he'd never seen them before, and no one spoke to them. The circle was already in motion. Masked celebrities mingling, nuggets presented on velvet cushions, soft music loopings in the background. Then Diddy suddenly called for silence. Clooney recounted. He stood in the center, raised a glass, and said, "Tonight we prove who belongs." The room froze. The lights dimmed. The red booth above flickered to life. But instead of remaining silent, a distorted voice echoed through the chamber. Begin the choosing. Clooney described what followed as the most disturbing moment of his life. A group of participants were escorted into the circle, blindfolded, trembling. Some were celebrities, he said. Others were unknown. One by one, they were asked questions by the voice above. Those who answered incorrectly or refused were escorted out through a side door that led somewhere no one returned from. I don't know what happened to them, Clooney admitted. All I know is that after that night, 3 people I recognized disappeared from the public eye within weeks. He said he tried to leave midway through the night, but a guard blocked his path. Mr. Combs said, "You should stay," the man whispered. "You're on the list." I felt like a prisoner, Clooney told the court. And in that moment, I realized this wasn't just some twisted party. It was a loyalty test, and I passed only because I stayed still and silent. He shook his head, but my soul didn't. This pivotal night cemented Clooney's resolve, leading him to confront the pervasive system that protected these dark secrets. George Clooney adjusted his seat, his voice heavier now. After that night, he said, "I made a decision. I would never go back, but leaving wasn't enough. Not anymore. I had to dismantle the mythology around him, around all of them." He described how the entertainment industry protects itself. It's not just contracts or NDAs, it's favors, roles, press coverage, and if you're obedient, your mistakes disappear. He explained how publicists, studios, and elite PR firms ran a quiet protection racket, ensuring that Diddy's name stayed glossy, even when rumors crept too close to the truth. I watched people try to leave his orbit, Clooney said. They'd vanish from the headlines, shows canceled, music shelved. Suddenly, nobody returned their calls. Clooney recalled a moment at the Cannes Film Festival in 2016. A young actor someone Clooney mentored had confided in him, trembling. He said, "They tried to get me into the cave. I told them no. Now my agent won't return my calls." The actor's career, Clooney testified, evaporated within 6 months. He ended up teaching drama at a middle school in Oregon. Not because he lacked talent, but because he said no to a handshake that was supposed to be silent. Clooney admitted his own complicity. "I stayed quiet for years. I accepted the protection. I nodded in the background because I was scared. Scared of being blacklisted, smeared, digitally erased. But more than that, I was scared of what I'd have to become if I stayed in." He testified that he had spent years gathering fragments of information, guest lists, invitations, photos never posted, receipts for donations to shelled charities that operated near the theme park. I kept it all, not to destroy anyone, but to protect myself, just in case. He looked out toward the press pit, eyes locking onto the swarm of cameras. "You all know the industry's broken. but no one wanted to say it because Diddy wasn't the disease. He was the symptom. The real sickness was silence. Then softly he added, "And silence is how monsters thrive." The courtroom was still. Clooney wasn't just testifying anymore, he was confessing. George Clooney sat forward, both hands gripping the wooden edge of the witness stand as if grounding himself. "I have one last thing to share," he said. "Something that's haunted me since the day it arrived." He explained that in late 2019, just before the world shut down, a package appeared at his Los Angeles home. No return address, no postage stamp, just his name written in delicate cursive. "That was the first red flag," he said. "Nobody knew I was back in LA, not even my agent." Inside the package was a single item, an unmarked flash drive. Clooney testified that he brought the contents to court under seal, but what he saw alone in his study that night, he would never forget. "It was surveillance footage," he said, from inside the cave. The courtroom held its breath. It was grainy, time-stamped, no sound, just black and white video of that red velvet chamber, a rotating overhead camera slowly capturing the circle. One by one, masked figures stepped forward. In the center, again, was a nugget, motionless, framed like a centerpiece. He looked down, then continued. And then Diddy entered. Clooney described how Diddy walked slowly to the center, removed his mask, and looked directly up into the camera, as if he knew it was being recorded. He raised a glass, gave a slow smile, and whispered something. I couldn't hear it, but I could feel it. The clip ended abruptly. There were no edits, no jump cuts, just a clean, slow document of ritual. He played it again, and then he destroyed the drive. But not before I made copies. He added, "Because that was never meant for me. It was a threat." Clooney paused. The message was clear. "We know you were there. We know you watched. And now, we're watching you." He said he hired private security, moved his children out of the country for 6 months, and declined major film roles. "I went dark," he said. "Because once you say no to the circle, really say no, they don't just forget you, they remind you." The prosecutor asked if he feared retaliation from testifying. "Of course I do," Clooney replied. "But I'm more afraid of what happens if we don't talk. If we all just keep playing dumb, clapping at award shows, pretending this world isn't built on blood." He took a deep breath. "I may not make another movie after this. I might lose everything, but I'll finally be able to sleep." What aspects of this testimony do you find most compelling, and what other details might you want to explore further?